Hello students, this is 6th standard SST class. Today we shall discuss lesson number 4, Ancient Civilization. Here is the introduction. This lesson introduces the prominent civilizations like Egypt, Mesopotamia and China. Besides, the Greek and Roman civilization also have been introduced. The contributions of all these civilizations have been briefly described. Now we shall see about the Egyptian flourishment, or how they flourished, or how the Egyptian civilization came into existence. Egyptian civilization adapted conditions of the river Nile. They used its valley for agriculture as the river was rich in soil for growing crops. The Indus Valley civilization, they led to Mesopotamian civilization on the banks of river Tigris and Euphrates. Chinese civilization along the Yellow and Yangtze river. They flourished on these rivers and Chinese civilization came into existence. Now we shall discuss about the competences. The first point is to understand the importance of river valleys in the progress of the prominent civilizations of the world. Second, know the political history of Egypt, Mesopotamia and Harappa civilizations and their contributions. Number 3, know the city-states of Greek civilizations and their contributions. Number 4, know the achievements of Julius Caesar and Augustus Caesar of the Roman civilizations. Now in the competencies, the first point is as to how the civilizations flourished along the river valleys. Second is, in the political history of Egypt, there is presidential rule. Harappan civilizations and their contributions towards civilizations is discussed. In third, the Greek civilization or political, physiological, artistic and scientific achievements are discussed. In the fourth point, Julius Caesar was the most powerful man in Roman Republic and Augustus Caesar was also a successful leader who restored peace and prosperity to the Roman states and was the first Roman emperor. This was all about the introduction and the competences. Now we shall learn the lesson in detail. Food, water, air and sunlight, as we know, everyone needs it. And here also, they were the inevitable for any life to survive. Similarly, shelter and clothing also are the basic necessities for mankind. Generally, we can get water and favorable weather conditions on the banks of rivers for leading life. So when the humanity or the humans understood the living, they needed food, water and air and light. They also needed shelter and clothing. So they understood how they should acquire them. So they started hunting animals for their food. They started to use the skin or the barks of trees as their clothing. This was the necessity of their life. So the prehistoric people settled on the banks of rivers and later civilizations prospered there. So prehistoric people understood how to use the river water and how to grow the things. Slowly they understood to do the agriculture, and use of water made them to stay on the banks of river. Hence, the river banks became the cradles of ancient civilization. cradles of ancient civilization in the sense they understood how to grow and lead their life. They understood to grow the grains for their lives. Also, they started rearing of animals that led to hunting. Hunting in the sense they hunted the animals and the young ones and they started rearing them along with the agriculture. Now Egyptian civilization on the banks of Nile, Mesopotamian civilization on the banks of Euphrates and Tigris, Chinese civilization on the banks of Hong Ho, Yangtze and Sikiang, and Harappan civilization on the bank of Indus came into existence. All these civilizations was possible due to the river banks. The early human beings understood how to lead their life, how to survive, and they slowly started growing the grains or they were started doing the agricultural activities. Here, on the banks of river Indus or river Nile, these civilizations were possible as the mankind developed their senses. They understood how to lead their life, how to make use of water, and they understood to lead their living along with their maybe the animals or maybe their children, young ones, and they started their living. Now we shall learn about the map. This is the map showing ancient civilization, how the Egyptian civilization or how the Egyptians led their life, and these accordingly they are introduced on the map. You can see on the map there is Roman civilization, Greek civilization, Mesopotamia civilization, Harappa civilization, China civilization. All these we have to learn in detail and understand their living. Now we shall go for the Egyptian civilization. Egypt is the first civilization of the ancient world. This civilization took birth on the bank of river Nile. The Nile is regarded as the longest river in the world and it is a major north-flowing river in Africa which joins the Mediterranean Sea. In the Nile had not flown through Egypt, it would have been a desert. Thus, Egypt is considered as the gift of Nile. So, the Egyptian civilization was more effective for all the other civilizations. The predicable or it is predicted that the flooding and controlled irrigations of the people living was flourished due to the rivers. As the river Nile flooded, the soil became more fertile. The valleys produced surplus crops which supported a more dense population. The Nile is said as the gift of Nile as it includes water, especially the role of water is more important. The transport, trade of papyrus, fish and other animals and rich soil helped them to flourish. Since the huge part of Egypt's territory is a desert, with some oases, therefore, the country depends on the Nile for its water supply. If river Nile had not flooded every year, the soil would have not been fertile because it is all desert and there are no plants or trees, or there won't have been any crops, cultivations, nothing. So the kingdom depended on the annual flooding of the river, which deposited silt in the regions, and the area for cultivation increased. The sediment provided with 3 crops annually. The desert protected from foreign invasions. Hence, the thing happened is, in Egypt, people learned their survival. And so, the gift, that is the river Nile, is said as the gift of Nile. Because the whole Egyptian civilization was possible because of river Nile. Political history. Egypt witnessed the rise of political dynasties about 5,400 years ago. The kings of Egypt were called pharaohs. Menes was the first pharaoh. His capital was Memphis. Among all the pharaohs after Menes, Khufu, Amenhotep, and Thomas were prominent. The largest pyramid of Giza is called the Great Pyramid of Khufu, which was built by Khufu. Amenhotep expanded his kingdom and established an empire by his conquests. Thutmose I was the greatest conqueror among all the later pharaohs. His daughter Hatshepsut came to power after him and came to be known as the first empress of the world. Now, as we read just now about the political history, that is about the pharaohs. Now you may understand, or you may have not understood, that pharaohs are the kings. They are the kings of Egypt, which were called as pharaohs. And Menes was the first pharaoh, that is, he was the first king, and his capital was the Memphis. He was the first ruler to unite Upper and Lower Egypts. After Menes, Khufu, Amenhotep, and Thomas were the prominent. Khufu was the second pharaoh. Amenhotep was the 9th pharaoh of the 18th dynasty. And King Thomas was also a ruler of ancient Egypt. After all these kings had ruled, there came also a lady, that is the daughter of Thutmose I, his daughter, and her name was Hatshepsut. The pronunciation is more difficult, but their names were very different from the others. And she extended Egyptian trade projects. Finally, in 2300, their rule was ended. Finally, about 2300 years ago, Alexander the Great conquered Egypt. He appointed his military general Ptolemy as his representative. Later, Ptolemy declared himself the king of Egypt and established the Ptolemaic dynasty. The popular queen Cleopatra was the last ruler of this dynasty. Eventually, Egypt became a province of Rome. Alexander the Great, he was the conqueror of Egypt. and his rules were more different than the other pharaohs, that is the other kings. He first introduced the military generals and Ptolemy as his representative to rule over the country. But unfortunately, Ptolemy himself declared as a king of Egypt and established the Ptolemaic dynasty. His rules were more different than the others. And among them, the popular queen Cleopatra was the last ruler of this dynasty. And eventually, Egypt became a province of Rome. That is, it came under the Roman Empire, and the changes were more different. Here, you may have seen the pictures of Giza pyramids. More pyramids were here famous, and you may also understand what were pyramids. Now, the pyramids were constructed after the king's death. That is, after the death of a king, his body was buried and then a pyramid was constructed. Now we shall discuss about the contributions of Egyptian civilization. Here, wheat and barley were the food crops of the people of Egypt. The water of Nile was used for agriculture through canals. The conditions of slaves was very pathetic. The large pyramids were possible because of these slaves. Women were given important status in the society. The people of Egypt believed in the life after death. So they preserved the dead bodies. The preserved dead bodies were called as mummy. So here in the contributions, wheat and barley were the food crops. Now as I told you, because of the river Nile, they understood to grow the crops, and different grains like different cash crops and many other grains were like wheat and barley were more famous. Even vegetables like figs, melons, fruits like pomegranates, then wines were also, they introduced and they understood how to grow. Jews were the slaves in Egypt. Now slaves is a word which you all may not understand. The thing happened is, these were the slaves in the sense they were the servants or they were the servers in Egypt. They had to work as they told, and also they were not paid for their work. They were under their rule. They were the war captives. The war captives in the sense, maybe when a king fought with another king and he was declared as the winner or he won the capital, then his people or the kingdom people, they were under the new king, and the people who were there were these kings. They treated them as their slaves. When there was war and the opposite king who got defeated, his army or people in his kingdom were said as slaves. I hope you all understood the meaning of it. Also, some slaves were like law violations because of law violators. That is, they did not follow the rules and regulations of the king. And some were slaves due to poverty. Poverty in the sense they were very poor. And so, these slaves were used by the new kingdom people as their servants, and they were mostly probably they were helpful in growing crops, and also they were helpful in construction of the pyramids. The large pyramids were possible due to them as they used to work day and nights to complete the pyramids. women were given equal rights. They had also the same powers and they had the share in the property. That is, women in the kingdom had their share in the property, or they were also given respect, and if they worked, they were given the same wages as the man worked. That is, they were given equal wages. They had freedom in working and even the other activities. In the last part, we read about the people in Egypt believed in the life after death. That is, life after death in the sense, after the kings had died, especially the kings, their bodies were buried, but their parts were removed and they were preserved in some liquids. So Egyptians, what they did is, after the person's death, they thought that there is life, and so they placed food and drink and their things which they used. That is, they used to place them outside the tombs or the burial chambers, the chamber in which the dead body was kept. Even the dead bodies were preserved after death were called as, these dead bodies were called as mummy. They believed that there is life after death. So they believed in immortality. That is, they thought that as we use the things and as we eat or drink or we survive, even after the death, they will survive and they will lead a life. So they used to keep all their important things, whatever they needed in the before life. That is, when they were alive, the things were kept in the burials. This was all about mummy. In ancient Egypt, each city has its own guardian, goddess. That is, they believed in the god, and sun and rivers were considered and worshipped as gods. The Egyptian script is known as hieroglyphics, which means sacred writing. These used ink to write on papyrus grass growing in River Nile. They had enormous knowledge of geometry, which was used in building large pyramids. The large statue of Sphinx is the most attractive Egyptian architecture. The Sphinx is an animal with the body of lion and the head of a man. You all must have observed in the pictures which are given. So you can see there hieroglyphics. That is, these are the words which are understood by the kings itself, and they were read by them, and these people understood how their life was. And here is the picture of the Sphinx. That is, it was the most attractive architecture, and it was the animal with the body of a lion and head of a man. So such things they believed, and they believed in the gods like sun and river as their gods, and they wrote the scripts accordingly. They used the ink to write on papyrus grass. Papyrus is one of the trees grown along the river Nile, and these leaves were used to write, as they had a lot of knowledge and they were very good in geometry. So they used to construct the pyramids accordingly as the geometrical signs. So these people led their life and they understood how to live, and these civilizations were successful. So this was all about the Egyptian civilization. So hope you all understood the lesson, and I suggest to read the lesson very well and understand.